Christmas is a time of warmth and family comfort. Millions of children around the world find gifts under the tree in the morning and joyfully open them. But for the Ramsey family, the morning of December 26, 1996, was the beginning of a nightmare that has not ended to this day. In their luxurious home in Boulder, Colorado, 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey, a girl whose life was just beginning, was found dead. Her death shocked America, and the investigation turned into one of the loudest mysteries in the history of the country. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was born in August 1990. Her name was made up of her parents' names, John and Patsy. She was the youngest daughter in a wealthy family. Her father, John, ran a successful company and earned millions of dollars. Her mother, Patsy, was a former beauty queen and still remained in the spotlight of local society. From an early age, Patsy began preparing her daughter for competitions. JonBenét participated in children's competitions, wore bright costumes, smiled under the flashes of cameras, and won titles. Her photos in crowns were published in newspapers during her lifetime. But behind all this stage image was an ordinary girl, cheerful, energetic, who loved dancing and playing with her brother. The family lived in a huge mansion with staircases, fireplaces, and a spacious basement. They were considered an example of a successful and respectable family. It seemed that they had everything: money, reputation, beauty. But this happiness turned out to be an illusion. Christmas, 1996, in the Ramsey household began like thousands of other American families. In the morning, they opened presents, had lunch together, and went to visit friends, the White family. There, everything was filled with laughter and a festive atmosphere. Adults chatted at the table, and children ran around the house, played, and showed off new toys. JonBenét, as always, was the center of attention. She demonstrated her little stage talents. She sang Christmas songs and laughed joyfully. The family returned home in the evening. It was frosty outside. Boulder was aglow with lights and street decorations. There was a Christmas tree in the Ramsey house, a fire crackling in the fireplace. Everything was cozy and calm. Patsy went upstairs with the children. JonBenét received another gift, a bicycle which was standing by the tree, and promised that she would definitely ride it in the morning. When the girl went to bed, the parents felt relieved. Another Christmas had passed. Everything seemed happy and calm. No one could have imagined that this very night would be the last in their daughter's life and would turn their home into a place where the eyes of the whole world would be riveted. Around 5:30 in the morning, Patsy woke up and went down the stairs. She noticed several sheets of paper on the steps. It was a long 3-page note. It said that JonBenét had been kidnapped. The authors demanded a ransom of $118,000. If the money was not delivered, the girl would be killed. The amount seemed strange. It almost exactly matched the bonus that John received at work. The note was not written in a hurry, but as if thoughtfully, with unnecessary details that made it suspicious. Despite direct threats not to call the police, Patsy immediately dialed 911. She also called her friends so as not to be alone. And this was the first fatal mistake. When Patsy found the note in the morning, her screams brought the whole house to its feet. John rushed down, read the text, and realized it was about a kidnapping. They called the police, and soon patrol cars were parked outside the house.
911 emergency.
Police.
What's going on?
515th Street.
What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
But it was in those first hours that the investigation was effectively ruined. The officers who responded to the call did not understand the scale of the tragedy and did not take the threat seriously enough. The house was not cordoned off, and access to the rooms was not blocked. Instead, friends and neighbors of the family were allowed inside. People wandered the hallways, sat at the kitchen table, cleared dishes, even washed cups. Every move destroyed potential evidence. The investigators did not conduct a thorough search. The basement where the body was later found was only briefly examined, as if it were believed that the perpetrator could not have left traces there. No one checked all the windows and doors for forced entry. No one isolated the parents to record their statements separately. Time was running out. If the kidnappers really existed, the police had lost precious hours when their calls could have been traced or their movements noted. If the killer was in the house, his trail had already been destroyed. In those first hours, a fatal error had been made, one that might have allowed the truth to slip away forever. Several hours passed. The police were waiting for a call from the kidnappers, but the phone was silent. Then John and his neighbor decided to inspect the house themselves. In the basement, he opened the door to a small room and saw his daughter's body. JonBenét was lying on the floor, wrapped in a blanket. There was duct tape on her face and a homemade garrote around her neck. Experts later determined that the girl had received a strong blow to the head, after which she was strangled. But at that moment, something else was more important. Her father had carried the body upstairs, depriving the investigation of the last chance to preserve clean evidence. Initially, it looked like a kidnapping, but the police quickly began to doubt. The note found in the house looked like a clever forgery. How could the kidnappers sit and write it for so long, risking being caught? Why did the ransom amount match the father's bonus? Why was the child's body in the basement, where it was extremely difficult for an outsider to get into? The answers to these questions increasingly pointed to the family itself. Some believed that Patsy could have hit her daughter in a fit of anger and then decided to hide the incident with her husband. Others claimed that the girl was accidentally killed by her brother Burke, and the parents staged the murder to save their son from prison and shame. Each version sounded terrible, but there was no evidence that could give a definitive answer. It was a shock to society. A respectable family suddenly found itself at the center of one of the most terrible crimes. The investigation was faced with an avalanche of contradictory data. Experts spoke of signs of sexual abuse, but later there were opinions that the injuries could have been caused by medical manipulations. Traces of DNA of an unknown man were found on the girl's clothes. This became the main argument in the family's defense, but opponents claimed that the DNA could have gotten onto the fabric at the factory. The note was analyzed by dozens of graphologists. Some said that the handwriting was similar to Patsy's, while others categorically denied it. Each side found its own arguments, and the truth again eluded them. The story immediately hit the newspapers and television. Photos of JonBenét in her pageant attire flew around the country. Another issue arose around the tragedy. Is it worth turning children into little adults and subjecting them to such attention? But for the family, the media storm became a new nightmare. Their every word, every facial expression was examined under a microscope. The parents were accused of being cold, of caring more about their reputation than their children. Americans argued, who is to blame? Who killed JonBenét? Meanwhile, the case became increasingly mired in controversy.
But that doesn't matter. Proving our innocence isn't important. Never has been.
Finding
what is
the
important
killer.
is finding the killer of our daughter.
Do you think that'll happen?
Absolutely.
Yes, I do.
Why, Mrs. Ramsey?
Because Lou Smith, who is experienced, is a truthful, ethical man, looked me straight in the eye and said, we're going to get him. We're going to find him.
After the tragedy, the family's life was never the same. Their home became a symbol of the mystery that the whole country was talking about. The media discussed the details daily, and television broadcast reports that often cast Ramsey in a dark light. It seemed that society had already passed judgment, although the trial never took place. In 1999, a grand jury voted to indict the parents, but the prosecutor hesitated to sign the papers, finding the evidence too weak. For John and Patsy, it was a double blow. They avoided trial, but they were forever branded as suspects. The family's life was falling apart before their eyes. John lost his wife in 2006. Patsy died of cancer, never getting an answer. Until the end of her days, she insisted that she was innocent and that their family had been turned into victims who were only accused because the police had made mistakes. In 2008, the prosecutor's office finally issued an official apology, stating that modern DNA tests had ruled out the family's involvement in the murder. But this did little to change public opinion. They had been considered guilty for too long, and it was impossible to change that picture. In 2016, JonBenét's brother, Burke, appeared on television for the first time. Many were waiting for this interview, but the reaction was unexpected. His calmness and even slight smiles when mentioning his sister.
Does that look like her handwriting?
Honestly, looking at that, she would always bug me about having good handwriting, and she would make me rewrite stuff to try to get me to have good handwriting, and I think it's too sloppy.
Caused a wave of criticism. People again began to talk about how he could have been the culprit of the tragedy, and his parents only covered for him. Years passed, but JonBenét's name never disappeared from the headlines. Each new generation of journalists returned to this case, filming documentaries, conducting investigations, analyzing old evidence. But the answers still remained behind the veil of secrecy. Today, decades later, the JonBenét case remains unsolved. The reasons are clear. The first hours of the investigation were lost. The house was turned into a walk-through yard, traces were destroyed, the body was moved, which means that key evidence was erased forever. Expertise gave contradictory results. DNA could have been evidence, or it could have been a random trace of a factory worker. The handwriting on the note could have pointed to the mother, but it could also have been an imitation. Even the causes of the injuries on the body were interpreted differently. The investigation was divided into two camps. Some were convinced that the killer was someone from the family. Others believed that it was an outsider and that the Ramseys were victims of circumstances. In the end, neither version was followed through. Today, the case has become a symbol of police mistakes and unsolved mysteries. Each new generation of detectives tries to solve it, but the truth slips further and further away. The story of JonBenét Ramsey is a tragedy that intertwines the death of a child, social pressure, investigative errors, and shadows of doubt. It is the story of how one night destroyed a family and left America with a question no one could answer. Who killed JonBenét Ramsey? Parents, brother, or an unknown assailant? The question still rings as sharply as it did in 1996. And perhaps the world will never know the answer. This case leaves us with more questions than answers. If you want to keep uncovering hidden truths together, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring these stories to light and ensures they're never forgotten.